Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived, and more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the odyssey.com or rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later. All right, welcome. This diagram that you are looking at is truly profound. I look forward to explaining this to you. I apologize, it's a little bit messy because it was hand drawn and not done with the use of a ruler. And that's because it, like usual, like has happened so often, it started out as a personal notes. This diagram initially was an attempt to assimilate the information in my own mind, and it just developed into what it did, and there's really no point in reproducing this with straight lines. It's pretty straightforward, and I feel I have the ability to explain what is going on here, so it'll be, I think, hopefully clear once I go through all of the information. It appears that there's a lot of information, but I don't think it'll take too long to go through this, and I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. And I'm sure you will find this extremely interesting. Of course, let's begin with the fact, or the basic premise here, that this video is predicting that on June 9th, 2025, Israel and the US will bomb Iran. That is the prediction. That is from God. When the prediction comes to pass, it will prove that this prediction is from God. And the reason for this prediction, and I know far better than anyone the reason for this prediction, is to prove all of the information that I will be explaining in this video. And so the way in which God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel, is that none of the prophetic signs can be properly or fully understood without their context and connections to the other prophetic signs. It's an interconnected web. It is the exact same thing as the Bible. The Bible is an interconnected document. It isn't a linear document, and one can take an infinite number of pathways through the Bible, and it all connects to itself, which is the same as with God's prophetic signs. And speaking of which, if you were to ask the average quote-unquote Christian today if they could name one single prophetic sign, they wouldn't even understand the question. And they would miss the obvious answer, which would be the Star of Bethlehem. Who was it that recognized the Star of Bethlehem? The wise men. Jesus commanded multiple times to watch for the signs of his return. It isn't optional, yet, like I just said, the majority of quote-unquote Christians wouldn't even understand the concept. But here we have a small fraction of a fraction of a fraction, a small sliver of God's big picture of interconnected web of signs, and that and of the thousands that he has been pouring out over the last years, the thousands of prophetic signs that most quote-unquote Christians have no idea about. They have no idea what is going on because they aren't watching, which is why they are sleeping, which is why Jesus warned to watch to the 10 bridesmaids. Who are the bridesmaids? They are quote-unquote Christians. All of them were sleeping. 5 of them made it to the banquet anyway. Who wasn't sleeping? Well, that would be the bride. The bride would be awake, waiting for her bridegroom, watching. The bridesmaids aren't so invested, like the majority of quote-unquote Christians today. But there'll be, it was a metaphor, but there'll be half of those that will make it because they have the Holy Spirit, even though they aren't watching and they're sleeping. Well, anyway, so let's begin here. So this is this June 9th date, 2025. I have no plan here as to how to proceed. But what I will say, let's begin with this theme of Barack Obama, because the theme of Barack Obama is pretty much contained throughout God's big picture of signs. He is the second of the 2 antichrists. And so what we have here is yet another, and basically, if you will, the biggest way in which God has developed his big picture of signs is through this theme of identifying Obama as the Antichrist. All right, now this number 188, this is the really, well, not really, there's a lot of profound connections here, but I find this one amazing, and that's because God frequently uses this number 188 in his signs, because the 188th word in the Strong's Hebrew Concordance is this word woe, exclamation mark, used in the Bible in the context of extreme judgment from God. And so what we have here is the day that it was announced that Barack Obama would receive the Nobel Peace Prize, to which he rightfully, correctly reacted with the fact that he hadn't done anything and didn't deserve the prize. But the left is cuckoo for all the wrong things and haters of all the right things, right? So they love Obama and hate Trump, for example. And that's spiritual. And God has designed it to juxtapose these 2 men with each other. How did Trump first come to rise in political popularity? It was through calling out Obama and how he was the unconstitutional president. Well, anyway, this was the day that it was announced that Barack Obama, for having done nothing, would receive the Nobel Peace Prize. Except what had he done? Delivered speeches. That's his gift. That's what makes him speak like a dragon, because the second of the 2 antichrists described in Revelation 13 speaks like a dragon. That's Barack Obama, because that is how he is who he is, his ability to deliver a speech. All right, and so what did he do after this? He delivered a speech, which was this date, which I'll get to in a second. He went to Norway and delivered another speech. But what's astounding here is this connection, because we have this woe connection from the Nobel Peace Prize Day, October 9th, 2009, and we have it connect to 6/9, which is, as I'm saying, is the predicted date of war, the opposite of peace, when Israel and the US will conduct war on Iran. They will bomb Iran, and that's why on the same day that Obama was announced to be receiving the Nobel Peace Prize was another amazing prophetic sign, which was the double bombing of the moon. NASA slammed 2 satellites into the moon, one after each other there, and it was a bombing of the moon to research the effects of bombing the moon, slamming into the moon. So it was an experiment, but the media and the NASA called it the double bombing of the moon. Okay, and that's because Barack Obama will have a double presidency. He will become the president again and the Antichrist. That's why the double bombing of the moon. The moon is important in God's signs because the moon symbolizes Christ. The sun symbolizes God the Father. The sun's light is too bright for us to gaze at, but we can gaze at the sun's light reflected off of the moon. And the moon is a giant rock, and in the Bible, rock is symbolism for Jesus. Hence why watching for, or two, I was saying hence why watching for the timing of the moon in the Bible is important and symbolic of watching for the timing of the Lord's return, which includes watching moon signs. Now, I don't really feel like listening again to what I've already recorded to know what I've already said. So at the risk of repeating some of the things that I might have already said, okay, what we have here is the day that Obama was announced to be receiving the Nobel Peace Prize on the day of the double bombing of the moon, which hints at the double presidency for Obama, when he will become the president. And in Bible prophecy, he is the Antichrist, predicted or prophesied to declare peace and security. And that's why we have this connection from the Nobel Peace Prize announcement to the day of the beginning of war with Iran. And this war with Iran will be a step, an event that will ultimately lead to the rise of the Antichrist. It will lead to other things that will bring about the Antichrist. Furthermore, the bombing of Iran is also symbolic of Satan and the Antichrist because first of all, pits will be opened, and this is an allusion to the bottomless pit being opened in Revelation chapter 9, from which Apollyon, a name for Satan, emerges with his fallen angels. And also Iran is Persia, which alludes to or hints at the prince of Persia in Daniel chapter 10, who has a battle with the archangel Michael in the demonic realm. And that's what the bottomless pit is leading to. That's what will, when the bottomless pit is opened, which will be symbolized by the pits being opened by the bunker busters that will bomb the nuclear facilities underground in Iran. When that will happen, it will be symbolic of the opening of the pit to the demonic realm, from which will emerge Satan and demons, the demonic, okay? So fallen angels. That's a woe. That's why the 188 months here. All right, now, what else was I saying? I was also saying that the wise men were wise and able to recognize the precise timing of the Lord's return, or the first coming, I should say, through the prophecy in Daniel chapter 9. And likewise, we would expect that there would be because there was a sign that revealed the timing of the first coming, we would expect the timing of the second coming to be revealed as well. And that is, of course, contradictory to the excuse that the quote-unquote Christians use by quoting by far the most quoted verse of the Bible, "No one knows the day." That's their excuse for not watching. And little do they know that that verse is a mistranslation and a misinterpretation out of context, etc. And furthermore, there are countless other passages that flatly contradict their interpretation of the possibility of knowing the timing of the Lord's return being impossible. The doctrine of imminence is a false doctrine. It's from Satan. I'll just give you one example of many. Jesus said in Revelation 3:3 to watch, and therefore if you don't watch, you will not know the hour at which I will come. Therefore, if you are watching, you will know the hour that he is coming. That's very clear. Read that passage again. I could explain more the true meaning of Matthew 36, no one knows the day, but right after he says that, Jesus, he also referred to Noah in a parenthesis, which means it's relevant to what he just said, and Noah knew the precise timing, just as did Lot and other servants of God know the precise timing of the impending judgment. Anyway, God's servants, of course, will know the precise timing. Furthermore, there's Amos 8:3 or 3:8. The Lord does nothing without his servants first knowing. All right. I mean, think about it, right? And of course, that's the reason for the Christians that are the bridesmaids. Jesus warned to watch in the parable of the bridesmaids because they weren't watching, they were sleeping. Half of them, although they weren't watching and sleeping, still made it to the banquet anyway. 5 of them didn't and were left behind. That's a metaphor. There will be quote-unquote Christians who will be left behind because they are not watching. All right, and who was watching? Well, it was the bride. The bridesmaids are not so invested, but the bride is. She's awake and watching for the return of her bridegroom. Now, that prophecy that revealed the precise timing of the Lord's first coming, Daniel chapter 9, is followed by a period of 7 years, symbolic 7 years, that is symbolism for the end times period of the Antichrist, which is why this symbolic 7 months period, exactly 7 months earlier from the announcement of the Nobel Peace Prize and the double bombing of the moon, was the low in the financial crisis of 2008. The bottom low in the stock market was reached on March 9th. Okay, 3 days before on the Monday, 3 days before on the Friday, the S&P 500 made its intraday low, the lowest tick. And it was coincidentally 666 points. In fact, the mainstream secular media reported on this and how it was spooky that the very bottom tick of the crash was 666 points. What they didn't know is that this comes from Bible prophecy. They just know something about 666 and that it's bad, but they don't really know. But this number is the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. And the 500th word in the Greek concordance is the word Antichrist, which is why 666 in the S&P 500. Not only that, the date 3/6, March 6th, hints at 3 6s. It also hints at 36, which is 6 times 6, and also 2 times 18, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6. And also the 36th triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 36th row is 666, and 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 all the way up to 36 equals 666. All right, now the Dow lost in the crash from the peak to the bottom 54% of its value, which is 6 times 9, and this ultimately connects to the date 6/9, which incidentally, 6 divided by 9 is 0.666. All right, that's why the Dow lost 6 times 9%. It's a way to communicate 666. Now, the inverse of 54, 1 divided by 54, is 0.185185 repeated into infinity, and 185 is the 60th semi-prime number. And so in other words, this is really a repetition of 666, 1 over 54, which is why we have this 185 months connection exactly from this date. But I'm jumping ahead because 9 months is prophetic in God's signs, because Jesus, when asked by his disciples to what signs to look for, he used the metaphor of birth pains regarding his second coming, his return. And the average human gestation period is 9 months. But furthermore, the number 9 is the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. That's from the Bible. The number 9 symbolizes God's judgment. 54 is a multiple of 9. 5 plus 4 equals 9. And we have this exact 9 months from the 54% loss to this other Obama Nobel Peace Prize day. Again, the Antichrist is prophesied to say peace and security, which is why it ultimately connects to the beginning of war in Iran. This connection here now this was the day that he arrived in Norway to deliver the speech the following day. The reason why this is prophetic, December 9th and not December 10th, is because on December 9th, there was the famous video that went viral of the spiral over the night sky in Norway. The giant spiral, which was later attributed to a malfunctioning Russian rocket in the Arctic. Look it up. It's quite something. It doesn't matter whether it was a Russian rocket or actual demonic induced, demon-induced. It's symbolism. And it was symbolism for a portal, because that's what it looked like. Because the rocket was spinning out of control, and its, I guess, jets produced this lights. It's beautiful lights that was like a spiral in the night sky. Huge spiral in the night sky, which was symbolic of a portal. And that's, of course, an allusion to the door or portal that will open to the bottomless pit, described in Revelation chapter 9. And that's what will be symbolized when Israel and the U.S. bomb Iran. The U.S. will use its bunker busters to go deep into the ground and explode the underground nuclear facilities in Iran. And this will open up massive pits in the earth in Iran, which will be symbolic of what's coming in April of 2029, when the demonic realm collides with the earthly realm. Lots will be said about that in future videos and other videos currently too. All right, and so that's why we have this connection here. Now, this connection, this opening of the bottomless pit in Revelation chapter 9, is symbolized by Revelation 9:11, which mentions Apollyon, the name, or Abaddon in Hebrew, and both names are used in the text. This is symbolism. This is the name of Satan. Satan and his fallen angels will emerge from the bottomless pit. And so Revelation 9:11 symbolizes this, and God is using this in his signs. And this is why this exact 186 months from this portal to this symbolic opening of pits, as in the bottomless pit, exactly 186 months, because the 186th prime number is 1109. That's astounding, because not only is this a pairing of 9 and 11, which hints at Revelation 9:11, but God also pairs 110 and 9 together in his signs. Big time. I could get into that, but I've explained it many times in other videos. But why don't I just play a quick clip here to explain it again? I'm just going to play a clip, and then I'll be right back, explaining the reason. It's astounding, it's profound. The reason for pairing 110 and 9 together in his signs. Again, it hints at 9/11, Revelation 9:11, and also 9/11 in 2001. I'll be right back. Jesus' official arrival into Jerusalem and first coming was on the 10th day of the first month in the Hebrew calendar. This is 110, and this hints at the number 110. In the book of Joshua, the date on which the Hebrews crossed over the Jordan River and officially entered the Promised Land was also on the 10th day of the first month, which is 110 and hints at the number 110. Jesus' first coming is symbolized by the number 110. This is why on 9/11, the two towers that collapsed were each 110 stories high. The collapse of two towers that were 110 floors was symbolism for Jesus' second coming. In the book of Joshua in the Bible, Joshua died at the age of 110. Joshua led the Hebrews around the security walls of the ancient city of Jericho before they collapsed in judgment. On 9/11, the Twin Towers, which were 110 stories high, collapsed, engendering a small earthquake that cracked the foundation of Federal Hall, where George Washington was inaugurated, on Wall Street. President George Washington was a founding father, and his inauguration as the first president was a symbolic founding of the nation. The cracking of the foundation of Federal Hall on Wall Street on 9/11 symbolized America's foundation in God being cracked. This is because after Washington's inauguration at Federal Hall, he then walked down Wall Street to Trinity Chapel, where he consecrated the nation to God, saying that if the nation were to ever turn away from God, it would lose its blessings. After 9/11, Trinity Chapel was called the Miracle Chapel, as it was the only building at Ground Zero to have survived. It did not even suffer a broken window due to the 70-year-old sycamore tree that was uprooted as it sheltered the chapel from the falling debris. In commemoration of this sycamore tree outside the chapel, today there is a huge bronze statue of its roots. In other words, through the 9/11 events, God was pointing to Trinity Chapel and Washington's covenantal consecration of the nation to God at Trinity Chapel. Wall Street is named after the original 9-foot-high wall of security that the Dutch built to keep the British and the Indians out. The collapse of 110 floors that cracked the foundation of Federal Hall on Wall Street, which is named after a 9-foot-high security wall, hints at 9/11 and points to Joshua, who died at 110, and the Hebrews that marched around the walls of security before they collapsed in judgment. 110 floors and the 9-foot-high wall of security that was Wall Street points to George Washington's march down Wall Street to Trinity Chapel that symbolized a covenantal relationship between America and God. To this effect, Washington's march down Wall Street with the New York Stock Exchange, the building that symbolizes America's financial strength, located on one side of the street, and Federal Hall, the building that symbolizes America's governmental and institutional strength on the other side, also pointed to the cutting rights ritual practiced in ancient Israel that was used in Abraham's and God's ritual walk in their covenant that is described in Genesis 15. A covenant that symbolizes Washington's walk down Wall Street and his covenantal consecration of the nation to God at Trinity Chapel. There are only two nations in the history of the world that were founded not on ethnicity or territory or language, but were founded solely for God: Israel and America. In every daily Bible that is divided into 365 readings, a portion of the Bible for each day of the year, on every September 11th, everyone that reads this standard 365-day Bible reads the passage in the book of Isaiah, chapter 9, verse 11, which is the judgment warning on ancient Israel, which was a raid on ancient Israel by the world's first recorded terrorists, the ancient Assyrians. And the terrorists on 9/11 were from the same part of the world, the Assyrians raided the northern kingdom of Israel first, and then later the southern kingdom of Judah was destroyed, which is why the terrorists on 9/11 hit the North Tower first, followed 17 minutes later by the South Tower. And this Isaiah 9:11 passage includes a mention of collapsed buildings and uprooted sycamore trees. On the morning after 9/11, Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle gave a speech to the world regarding the events on 9/11. He quoted the passage in Isaiah 9:11, not realizing it was a judgment warning on the ancient Jews. He quoted how, after the raid by the Assyrians, the Hebrews did not repent to God, but instead vowed defiantly to rebuild and become stronger than before. And so, like the ancient Jews, America did not repent after the judgment warning, and instead defied God even more. And so, like ancient Israel, America will now be destroyed. This is why, in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, he frequently pairs together the number 110 and the number 9. Both of these numbers symbolize God's judgment on the nation, and paired together, these numbers point to the big judgment warning that was 9/11. As well, these numbers paired together in God's signs and connections serve as a witness confirmation that the perceived signs and connections are from God. After the judgment warning of 9/11, America was given a period of grace to repent and turn back to God, or else judgment destruction. In the Bible, a 20-year period symbolizes a complete period of waiting. Jacob waited 20 years to get possession of his wives and property. The children of Israel waited 20 years to be freed of Jabin, the king of Canaan, when they were freed from bondage by Deborah and Barak. The Ark of the Covenant waited 20 years in Kiriath Jearim, and Solomon spent 20 years building his home and the house of God. On the 20th anniversary of the buildings that collapsed on 9/11 was the sudden collapse of America's presence in Afghanistan, and the iconic scene of this was the U.S. Air Force plane leaving the airport in Afghanistan, and the big number on the side of its plane is 1109, which hints at 110 and 9. All right, so as I was saying, the Dow lost 54%. It connects with this exact 9 months to this spiral portal sign in the night sky. And the inverse of 54 is 1 divided by 54 is 0.185185 into infinity, which is the reason for this exact 185 months, but also 185 is the 60th semi-prime number, a number that is only divisible by 2 other prime numbers, and God uses this. And so in other words, this is a repeating 666. Okay, and so that's why, because again, 6 divided by 9 is 0.666. This connects with the day that the S&P made its intraday low in the crash at 666. That connects with the 6 times 9, which is again 0.666, to the spiral, and then this if you will, 185, which hints at this, and 666. All right. Well, that gets us to this stock market sign here, which is another second witness that confirms everything. Because this is the way God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And so this is the second witness because we have the stock market signs here connecting to this stock market sign here, which confirms the 185, and then again the 54, because the inverse of 54 is 185. Well, okay, so on this day, the Dow lost 119 points, which hints at Revelation 9:11 again. And the S&P 500, and again, the 500th word in Strong's Concordance is Antichrist, it lost 4.03 points. That's because this day is 4 weeks and 3 days before this Antichrist day. Again, because Iran is Persia, and which hints at Prince of Persia, which is the name for Satan in Daniel chapter 10 in the Bible. And the Prince of Persia had a battle with Archangel Michael in the demonic realm. And on this day, pits will be opened in Iran, Persia, which will be symbolic of the opening of the bottomless pit to the demonic realm. So that's the reason why this 4 weeks and 3 days connection is relevant from the loss of 4.03 points. Also, 1 divided by 43, the inverse is 0.023, and God pairs 23 and 9 together because the Antichrist was inaugurated in 09 and wore in basketball in high school, the basketball president wore 23, number 23. But also the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist is described in Ezekiel chapter 9, and the mark of the Antichrist changes a person's 23 pairs of chromosomes. All right. Now, there's more things that happened on May 9th, which I will, might as well explain right here instead of, maybe I'll make a separate video. I'll make a separate video explaining that. All right. So far, we have explained this part of the diagram, this central part of the diagram. And from here, let's go to the top and talk about this story that God is telling. And by the way, that's what God does. Through his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, and the interconnectivity of all of the signs, and again, none of the signs can be fully or properly understood without their connections and context with the other signs. He does this in order to tell stories. And he tells stories for the purpose of conveying important, essential information and knowledge that everyone needs to know. This is how these conclusions come about. For example, it's through the interconnections between the signs that God is able to tell and convey the information that, for example, leads to this prediction. And, okay, so all right, so May 12th is this date that God has used before because, for one thing, it hints at 5 times 12, which is, 512, which is 8 times 8 times 8, which is significant because the name in Greek, Jesus, is equal to, in Greek gematria, 888. All right, and there's more significance to the reason for number 8 and its significance with Jesus. But that's interesting that this date has been used prior to this year for this purpose. But on this particular May 12th, we had this prophetic sign, which was Barack Obama's quote-unquote conversation. I guess he doesn't give speeches so much anymore as instead sit on a stage and answer some questions. But he went to Oslo, Norway, to have this conversation in an auditorium, paid attendees, etc. I don't know how many attended, but in the past, the number that had attended was prophetic. But anyway, this date is exactly 4 weeks to this date on which it is predicted that Israel and the US will bomb Iran and open up pits, which will symbolize the opening of the door, the portal, to the bottomless pit in Revelation chapter 9. As I explained earlier, Iran is symbolism for Persia, which is hinting at the Prince of Persia, which in Daniel chapter 10 is symbolic of Satan and the demonic realm. And that's why when the pits are opened, when the bunker busters bust open the earth in Iran, it will symbolize the opening of the pit, the bottomless pit, in Revelation 9. Now, the number 4 is symbolic of door in God's signs, because the 4th letter in the Hebrew alphabet is a symbol for a door. This is also one reason why we are talking about the 44th president, who incidentally was elected on the date 11/4, which hints at 11 times 4 equals 44. Speaking of Iran, Iran is known for the Iranian hostage crisis, which is also known as the 444-day Iran hostage crisis. All right, so in other words, actually, the Islamic Revolution in 1979 in Iran has been leading up to this date. This is like, if you will, the climax, when finally the US and Iran go at it and war begins. But this war has been building for decades, since the end of the, or rather I should say the beginning of the 444-day Iran hostage crisis. That's 444. Incidentally, hostages are symbolic of what's coming when the demons emerge from the door to the bottomless pit, which is demonic possession of the masses who have taken the mark of the Antichrist, which is the thing, and you know what I'm talking about, the thing that you can't talk about. And that's what the symbolism in hostage is. The hostages, the attempted rescue of the hostages in the failed Operation Eagle Claw resulted in 4 + 4 deaths of U.S. military service personnel and 4 injured. During that episode in the middle of the desert, on the remote road, an Iranian bus came by with civilians, and 44 people in the bus had to be well, they weren't taken hostage, but they were held. Let's just put it that way. I'm lack of words here at the moment. So they were just held captive, if you will, I suppose. Okay. So anyway, well, not just anyway. That would be prophetic too, because in a sense, that's also symbolism for the coming hostage taking of people's bodies by demons when they are demonically possessed. All right. Now, so that's why it's exactly 4 weeks. But 4 weeks is also 4 times 7. And this is a number that God uses to symbolize this, what we're talking about, which is when demons emerge from the bottomless pit and pretend to be aliens. And the big thing that people associate with aliens is Roswell, which occurred in 1947, in the 47th state, on the date 7/4, which outside of the US is written as 4/7. And Obama, the president who will promote the demons that have been or will be pretending to be aliens, was elected when he was 47 years old. Okay, so 4 times 7 weeks. 4 weeks from the 44th president in his speech in Oslo. Now, why is this Oslo speech important? Well, I mentioned that earlier. Because of this, the sign in the night sky that resembled a portal on the day that he was in, and it was over Norway, on the day that he was announced to be the recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. Okay, so that's why God is following up with this visit to Norway with this. Well, this wasn't the visit to Norway, this was the date of the visit to Norway, but he's following up with this sign here, which is Obama's return to Oslo, Norway, which is why it's astounding that it's exactly 4 weeks before this predicted date of the symbolic opening of the pits in Iran. Now, this date here, and this will be war, and it'll be sanctioned by Trump, not just sanctioned, it will be initiated by Trump. Trump is the man that will decide the war, to go to war. Not even Israel really decides this. Well, I suppose they do, but they need the U.S.'s assistance with its bunker busters. So it's ultimately up to Trump. And Trump made this statement here, the calm before the storm. He made this cryptic statement to the press in the White House when there was a big gathering, a gala, if you will, of members of the military. And Trump made this statement, and the press was asking him, what do you mean? And he said, well, you'll see. But he made this statement, the calm before the storm, on October 5th, 2018. Now, speaking of Israel, Trump was born exactly 700 days before the birth or rebirth of Israel. When Trump was elected, he was 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old. This is leading to the predicted date that Israel and the U.S. will bomb Iran, and this date when he said the calm before the storm, when at the gathering of the military in the White House, it was exactly 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days before this Oslo, Norway, hinting at Nobel Peace Prize sign, which is connecting with exactly 4 weeks to war, the opposite of peace. But the Antichrist again will say, as according to Bible prophecy, peace and security. Okay, now that's quite amazing, because again, Trump is associated with this 3 sets of 7, because Trump is God's trumpet, and the Israelites, when they crossed over the Jordan into the Promised Land and took Jericho, enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7. They marched around the walls of security of Jericho once per day for 7 days, and then on the 7th day they marched around 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. And then the walls of security collapsed, which is why Trump's presidencies and his election campaigns were synonymous with his border wall of security. And when he left office, the wall of security at the southern border collapsed. So that's why the 3 sets of 7. That's why Trump was 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old on the day of his inauguration. That day, his inauguration, the first one, was 73 days, which hints at 3 sets of 7, after he was elected by 77 electoral votes. And on that day, Netanyahu, the leader of the Israelites, if you will, just like Joshua, who led the Israelites before they blew 7 trumpets, right? On the day that Trump was elected by 77 electoral votes, Netanyahu had been in office for exactly 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days. A parallel with this 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days. Now, Netanyahu was in office for 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days on the day that Trump was elected by 77 electoral votes, exactly 73 weeks, which also hints at 3 sets of 7, after the beginning of Trump, which is the symbolic beginning, was when he descended the golden escalator in his trumpet tower. Towers and the collapse of them are like the collapse of walls of security in the Bible. That day when he descended the golden escalator, 73 weeks exactly before he was elected by 77 electoral votes, and the leader of the Israelites, Netanyahu, had been in office for 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days. Anyway, the day that he descended the escalator was exactly 188 months. Right? Here's 188 months right here. I just explained that. The day he descended the golden escalator in the Trump Tower at the beginning when he announced his presidency campaign in 2015 was exactly 188 months after the 7.0 earthquake in Joshua Tree, California. Again, it's the book of Joshua, and Joshua, who led the Israelites in their 3 sets of 7 around the walls of security, and then the walls of security of Jericho collapsed due to an earthquake. Archaeology proves this, and that's why the 7.0 earthquake in Joshua Tree, California, exactly 188 months, as in woe, exclamation mark, used in the context of extreme judgment from God, before trumpet. Because Trump is one big massive trumpet from God regarding judgment and destruction for America. That's why he's associated, Trump is, with the border wall of security. It symbolizes America's walls of security collapsing in God's judgment. Trump is trumpeting the destruction of America. In other words, big picture. That's the big picture. And in all of that, what I just explained is more confirmation for this 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days. And as I explained earlier, this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and conditions works. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. All right, now let's go down to the bottom part of this diagram. This date here is the day that the new pope, the 4th pope of this century, and God again uses the number 4 to symbolize the door that will open the bottomless pit. This day, when he is officially inaugurated as the pope on May 18th, his first inauguration. I don't get it, I'm not Catholic, but I guess he's officially the pope when he gives his first mass oh, whatever. This is the day he's officially inaugurated. And it'll be the, let's see. Sorry, why don't I just expand the diagram here? Instead of trying to squint, sorry. All right, so here we're talking about May 18th, the official inauguration of Pope Leo. All right, and the date it was announced was May 9th. We already talked about the May 9th stock market sign right here. And he's the fourth Pope of the century, all right? 4 is the number for door again. And we were talking about this connection to the opening of the pits, which will be symbolic of the opening of the door to the bottomless pit. Now, it's the third inauguration of the century, and it's 22 days before the predicted date of the bombing of Iran, which is again symbolic of Persia and Prince of Persia and the demonic realm. The demons will emerge from the bottomless pit, and they will promise people through the mark of the Antichrist immortality without God and the reversal of aging. And that's symbolized in God's signs by Genesis 3:22, which is why we have the third inauguration 22 days before this demon's symbolic date, when the pits will be opened in Iran. All right? That's amazing. And again, it's the Pope. The Pope is the first of the two Antichrists. And it isn't Pope Leo, it's Pope Francis. He will be resurrected. All right? That's another story, though. Now, this is also 11 plus 11 days. And the number 11 in God's signs is symbolic of a few things. One of the things is that it symbolizes invasion. It symbolizes the taking over of territory, which is what is being alluded to when this sign will happen here. The demons coming out of the bottomless pit from the demonic realm and colliding with the earthly realm, taking over the earthly realm, that's an invasion. The Israelites, when they took the promised land, it was a taking over of territory. The number 11 is associated with that. How is that? Well, the number 11 is the number 11 that God uses for reflection. And the words that God spoke through Moses to the Israelites before they crossed over into the promised land was this contrast or reflection between a promise of blessings and curses, depending on whether or not they would obey God's commandments. And that's likewise what's happening here. That's why John Winthrop, when he arrived in the 11-ship flotilla, gave his speech of the famous one of the shining city on a hill. And that speech was derived from Deuteronomy chapter 29 regarding God's promises of blessings and curses, because the pilgrims saw their crossing of the Atlantic and the escape of persecution from the King of England as analogous as the Israelites escaped from the King of Egypt and crossing the Jordan River into the Promised Land. Now, 22 days is also 528 hours. And that's amazing, because 528 is equal to 4 times 44 plus 4 times 44 plus 4 times 44. And God repeats a number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning in general. So what it is 176. It's 176 plus 176 plus 176. But 176 is used in God's signs to symbolize this 4, because it's 4 times 44. And again, this all hints at the 44th president Antichrist, but also the door that will be opened, and that's why this connection. That's amazing. Now, 528 is also the 32nd triangular number. What's predicted is that on this day, bombs will be dropped on Iran. The word bomb and Obama are equal to 32 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. And Obama hints at Obama. Now, 32 is also 8 times 4. Okay? By the way, what do I mean by a triangular number? In a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 32nd row is 528. But 32 is also 8 times 4, which hints at 84. And 84 is equal to bomb and Obama in Hebrew gematria. Also, Obama was born on the date 84. And the name, as I just mentioned, I just mentioned it. Okay. So 84 is symbolic of bomb and Obama as well. So that's more confirmation of this connection. In other words, this is legitimate. This is a real connection that God has demonstrated here. Now, what further confirms this is this connection here. Again, this is how God's signs works. It requires second and third witnesses to confirm a matter. So what we have here is from May 18th, we go exactly 719 months back, and we get this sign, which I'll explain. But first, the relevance of 719. It is the 128th prime number. 128 is 4 times 4 times 4 plus 4 times 4 times 4. And God repeats a number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. Okay? And G128, which is this number that God uses to symbolize this word in the Greek concordance. Michelle Obama, for example, was born exactly 128 weeks after the birth of Barack Obama. That's because of G128, which is the word in the concordance for the Ethiopian. Obama was born in East Africa near Ethiopia, so that's the symbolism. There's more to that, but that's why 128. And other Ethiopia signs furthermore in God's signs. Okay, now, because Obama, although he was born in Kenya, it was, first of all, close to the Ethiopian border, but it's all East Africa. It's symbolism, all right? And if you are a skeptic, what I have to say is something interesting that I've recently learned about, which is Ian McGilchrist. Go to YouTube and watch a video of his, or rather, if anything, an interview of him. He's a professor, I forget which university, but he is known for his work regarding the right versus left hemisphere and the different ways in which the two halves of the brain think. And unfortunately, our modern culture is really dominated by left brain thinking. It's really out of whack, especially on the left. The left is extremely left brain thinking. And you need a balance. You need the right hemisphere of the brain, which the left and the modern culture does not have. And so that's why they can't think in terms of symbolism so much. But you need the right side of the brain for wisdom, which is why the left has no wisdom. They aren't able to think clearly and straightforwardly. They only think in terms of analytical left brain type thinking, and they are not able to think in general and are extremely rigid and do not understand things like what I just said. How East Africa is also being hinted at with the Ethiopian, right? You don't get it because if you don't get that, it's because you're using too much of your left brain. You need to think differently. I encourage you to look something up about that. Okay, so what does it get us to, this significant date here? What is this? June 18th, 1965. It connects with exactly 4 years to this date here, June 18th, 1961, when 4 young schoolgirls witnessed or claimed to witness Mary apparitions. Okay? And again, 4 is symbolic of a door to the demonic realm, and all Mary apparitions in all of history have been demons pretending to be Mary. This is a severe warning if you are a Catholic. Make no mistake. I know far better than you the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God. And it is to prove the controversial things that I am saying, which is that Catholicism is not Christianity. It is not a legitimate denomination of Christianity. I am not saying that all Catholics are going to hell. Most of them are on their way to hell, but there will be many things that will happen between now and the second coming that God will use to hopefully rectify that equation, including the Antichrist being the Pope. That is the main purpose for why the Antichrist is the Pope. It is to hopefully finally wake up these Catholics that are not on the right path, which includes the worship of Mary. The truth is, when you worship Mary, and you are worshiping Mary, I don't care what verb you want to put on it, you are worshiping demons. There is no Queen of Heaven. She's not listening to your prayers. She's not the ear between you and God and Jesus, etc. Okay? And the Bible tells us that we get the deception we ask for. And that's why Catholics are constantly having supernatural experiences that confirm for them their pagan demonic religion. Let me explain. But the passage I'm referring to is 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. We get the deception we ask for. Just like, for example, how people that practice yoga and meditation get the supernatural highs that they ask for. When they believe that this is a way to spiritually evolve their spirit, the demons, Satan will give them the confirmation that they're looking for. God will allow that. God gives them that. In fact, it's from God, as it says. God sends them a strong delusion, as it says in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. So, and I know firsthand, by the way, because of my the time that I spent seriously into Eastern religion and meditation in my early 20s. The supernatural highs that people that do yoga get are real. That's why they become addicted to it. And what I mean by addicted is that's Satan's strategy, is he lures people in. It's called spiritual bondage. And the more they do it, the more they need it. It's like a drug addict. At first he does it recreationally, or her, and then over time, the drug addict just needs to do the drug just to get back to normal because they experience the lower lows after the highs. Same with people that do yoga. They experience, and meditation, they experience the highs, but then they experience the lower lows later. And so then they need more. They need more yoga, more meditation. Okay, that's how it works. That's the same with Catholics. And what's the same that for people that believe in aliens and want to have an alien experience, they go out into the woods and look for the UFOs, they find them. The UFOs find them. And so likewise with Catholics. If they think that the piece of bread is going to save them, or Mary is the Queen of Heaven, etc., they're going to have Mary apparition experiences. They'll get the deception that they ask for. I'll give you an example. I once spent a while one day talking, over a few days, I think, with a lady who was a Catholic, and she told me of her time, for example, because we were friendly, she was a friend, if you will. She confided a time when she and her family or friends were in a cathedral, and the piece of bread that they take for their salvation levitated off of the table. And I have no reason to not believe her, because I know that Catholics are constantly having supernatural experiences like this. In fact, if you talk to Catholics, I find in general, the biggest reason why they believe in Catholicism is because they have had, or they know of others who have had, or they have read about these supernatural experiences that confirmed for them their religion. By the way, interestingly, that's also how the Church of Latter-day Saints works. The church people, when they proselytize, encourage people to pray to God and ask God if Joseph Smith was a prophet and if he's like this special guy and whatever. And then they get the supernatural. Often they will get the supernatural experience that confirms for them that this was true. But they're getting the deception they ask for. Those that will get that experience are somehow secretly wanting it to be true, which would be logically the case if they're praying in the first place. So this happens to Catholics. It happens to people that become Catholic. You'll have the non-Catholic go into the cathedral and just pray to God, God, if this is all true, if Mary's the queen and all that, let me know. And then they have later a supernatural experience of Mary, because deep down they wanted it to be true. So that's how it works, okay? So anyway, the piece of bread that they take for their salvation, which is demonic theology, it's not the Bible, levitated off the table. The question is, well, How or why? Because I don't doubt that it happened. So the answer is there's only two explanations. One, either an angel levitated the bread off the table in order to encourage the Catholics to take more pieces of bread for their salvation, or a demon levitated the piece of bread off the table in order to encourage the Catholics to take more pieces of bread for their salvation. And if you know the Bible, the latter is the truth. Right? And so that's why the demons do what they do, and Mary apparitions say the things they say. Another way to know for sure that all Mary apparitions in history have been demons pretending to be Mary is you just need to read the quotes, the supposed things that these demons pretending to Mary have said. And if you know the gospel, if you know the Bible, which 90% of Catholics don't, they don't read the Bible. That's one of the reasons for Satan's trick. Because if you think about it, Satan, the word Satan in Hebrew means adversary. His job is to challenge people. He's the challenger. He challenges people and their faith. His job is to deceive people. Now, he's all got millions, he's got a trick unique for each individual, but he's also got large-scale tricks. For example, different religions, right? And if you think about it, if his job is to counter the truth of the gospel, what would be one way he would do it? He would design something that looked like Christianity on the surface to the ignorant and fool people with it. Wrap it in a wrapper that looks like Christianity, but in fact is in truth pagan religion. Because the truth is, when Rome converted to Catholicism, it didn't do away with its pagan religion, it just repackaged it, including, for example, the worship of the fertility goddess, like Isis, Ishtar, Aphrodite, right? And all of that ancient artwork that was the worship of the fertility goddess included the goddess holding the baby, which is why all of the medieval art is focused on Mary and the baby in her arms. It's all about Mary, right? That would be how the devil would do it. He would trick people to focus on Mary instead of Jesus, for example. So that's, in a nutshell, the Catholic religion for you. The Mary religion, right? And so because of that, at the end times, because of this huge relevance of Catholicism in history, you would figure that the end of the age would climax with something very special regarding Mary, which is exactly what's going to happen. There will be a massive Mary apparition that will deceive the world, and it won't be like Lourdes or Fatima or Guadalupe or what I'm talking about down here, which is the Garabandal apparitions, the Garabandal apparitions. I'll explain in a second. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be recognized by the entire world, just like the demons pretending to be aliens. In other words, no longer will it be like a conspiracy theory. It'll be like mainstream news, aliens are here. But it will be in truth demons pretending to be aliens. And the only people that will recognize that and call it out are the true Christians, the fundamentalist Christians. They've done studies on this, actually, of among the world's faiths who would not accept aliens if they were to arrive. The only group are the people that believe the Bible is the truth, the literal truth, like the Word of God. The true Christian recognizes that it is impossible for there to be aliens. It's impossible. Otherwise, Christianity isn't true. But the quote-unquote Christian that doesn't really know their own faith, like most Catholics, will fall for this. And I don't just mean Catholics, by the way. I mean the majority of quote-unquote Christians, including the majority of quote-unquote Protestant Christians. They will fall for this because they don't really know their own Bible. They don't. In other words, it's so basic because in the Bible, the center of the universe is Earth. I don't care how big the universe is, the Earth is still the center of it. And the center of God's creation, the purpose of God's creation is man and God's relationship with man. And this relationship with man is so important to God that he became a man and died for the sins of man on a cross. And he did not hopscotch around the universe, dying on crosses as another in alien life forms. All right, that's the basics of Christianity, right? So But similar to that is the Mary the demons that have been pretending to be Mary. Because again, you get the deception you ask for. The deception that's coming upon the world that aliens exist is the deception the whole world has been primed for and asking. All right, so the 4 young schoolgirls that witnessed the Mary apparition, which was a demon, because again, you just need to read the quotes that the demons pretending to be Mary have said throughout history, and they all say these things that are contradictory in some way, a significant way, to the gospel. For example, the Mary apparition will say, take more pieces of bread for salvation. Just for example, right? And do more penance or whatever. The Catholic things, the superstitions that they do, the sacraments. The demons pretending to be Mary will say, I'm not happy about the amount of sacraments that people are doing. Just like the demon that lifted the piece of bread off the table, in order to encourage people to do more of this pagan superstition religion. And it's all superstition. It's a trick from Satan to trick people from having a genuine, sincere relationship with God. Well, how do you get to know God? Well, how do you have a relationship with God? Well, you get to know him. And how do you know him? By reading the Bible, which Catholics don't do. Why? Because they're convinced or tricked into being satisfied with their superstitions. And one of them being the trick, the deception that Catholics, to get cleansed of their sin, go into the box and confess their sins to a man, and then later do the sins again, typically. And this is because that's what Satan would do when he would disguise himself as a sheep, when he is in fact a wolf with sheep's clothing. He would develop these methods and ways for people to get steered astray. Right? There's all kinds of things in Catholicism, like Catholics are not to read the Bible even. For many years, for centuries, they were forbidden from reading the Bible. But that culture of not reading the Bible still persists. That culture of you don't need to read the Bible, or you shouldn't really read the Bible, still actually persists, even because of the tradition that dates back from when they were forbidden to read the Bible. Today, if Catholics have a problem or a question, they go to the priest. They don't go to the Bible. They're very biblical illiterate, easy prey for Satan and demons. So that's why the demon will pose as Mary and tell them to do these sacraments, more of them for their salvation, etc. Well, anyway, so 4 years from the first time that these 4 schoolgirls witnessed the Mary apparitions is amazing, because 4 is symbolic of the door through which the demons will emerge and then deceive people through this coming Mary apparition that's coming, this big one, this worldwide one, this global one. I'm not saying that Mary will be everywhere in the globe. I'm saying that there will be a massive Mary apparition that won't be secretive and will be reported in the news globally. Now, the 4 schoolgirls had their Mary apparition in this Garabandal apparitions story exactly 4 months before the first message. So the demon pretending to be Mary had 2 messages. Okay, 2 messages, which is one reason why it is believed and predicted that there will be 2 Mary apparitions, 2 massive global Mary apparitions. I believe the first one will be on March 22nd, 2029, and I believe the second one will be April 24th, 2029. Right before the resurrection of Pope Francis. Well, anyway, this in turn, which is 4 months after the beginning of the 4 schoolgirls, is exactly 44 months before the second and last message, when this whole thing ended, when the Garabandal apparitions ended with the second message. And again, you just need to read the messages if you know the gospel to know that it's a demon. It's very obvious to someone who knows the gospel. But for Catholics who mostly don't know the Bible and don't know the gospel and are superstitious about their faith and are into Catholic culture, etc., instead of the Bible, yeah, they're not going to get that. They're not going to easily see that it's a demon pretending to be Mary. Now, the Garabandal apparitions were in northern Spain. That's because this symbolizes the Spanish 9/11. The bombing, and again, this connects with bombs, the bombing of Iran. The bombing of the trains in Madrid, in northern Spain, killed 191 people, which since at 9/11, the people of Spain at the time and since then have called this event the Spanish 9/11. And it happened exactly 2.5 years after 9/11. And that's why in the bombings, it was 2,500 people that were injured. The 2,500 people confirms the 2.5 years exactly from 9/11 to the Spanish 9/11 bombings in northern Spain. And the Spanish 9/11 in northern Spain was because the terrorists on 9/11 did their final preparations in northern Spain. 9/11, because it hints at Revelation 9:11, which is the passage that symbolizes chapter 9, which regards the emergence of the demons pretending to be Mary and aliens from the bottomless pit. So that's why we have the Garabandal apparitions that hint at 9/11 connecting with this bombing here in this trail of signs that I have now explained. The last thing that I haven't explained yet, I didn't explain this here. The beginning of the 4 schoolgirls' Garabandal apparitions connects with the birth date of the 44th president. 4 schoolgirls, 44th president. It is an astounding 12.88% of a year. The difference, that's because of H 1288, which is the word that God uses in other signs. God uses this 1288 number in other ways in the big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. Because this word in the Hebrew concordance means to kneel and to curse God, which is symbolic of Satan and the choice that people make when they follow Satan. You either kneel to Satan and curse God, or you kneel to Jesus. That's the choice. And so, also, this is 47 days, and I explained earlier how 47 is relevant to what we're talking about. First of all, the president, Obama, was elected when he was 47 years old. And again, the big thing that's associated with aliens is Roswell, which happened in 47 in the 47th state on the date 7/4, which outside the U.S. is written as 4/7. It's also America's birthday, and it's why this happened on that date. I forget the connection to actually 7/4 in 1776, but it's a relevant connection too. But the reason for all this is because the destruction of America is God's what he's focused on primarily here, because America is or was God's nation. There are only 2 nations in the history of the world that were founded on a relationship with God. An individual and a nation's judgment is commensurate with the amount of light and blessings they received. For example, a person in the West who has full knowledge of the gospel and rejects Jesus will not be subject to the same thing after they die as someone, for example, in Thailand, who barely has even heard, if at all, the gospel. In other words, there will be many people in hell, and there will be various forms of hell. Not everyone is going to the exact same place in hell. We could call it Sheol, if you will. It's called Sheol in the Bible. There will be people that will be in Sheol that will have a second chance. That's clear in the Bible. There are passages in the New Testament that support that. And there's many Christians that will say, no, you can't have a second chance. It's not true. There will be people that won't get a second chance, but there'll be many, many, many people that will get a second chance. And those would be the people that didn't get a fair opportunity, including those that lived before Jesus, for example. Okay? All right, now, so we've explained that now. So one last thing here. So Pope Leo is equal to 84 in simple English gematria. The day he will become officially the Pope will be 8 months and 4 days after he turns 69 years old. And again, this connects to the date 6-9. And 8 months and 4 days hints at 84. And it hints at Obama and the word bomb. And it connects with the bombing of Iran, which is Persia, ancient Persia, Prince of Persia, Satan, demonic realm, opening of pits. And also Obama was born on the date 8-4. And so this is the Pope's birth date. He turned 69 on this day. 69 is also symbolic of the period in the most central prophecy in the Bible of 69 weeks that is followed by the 70th week, which is symbolic of the period of the end times and the Antichrist. And finally, the most biggest reason, if you will, for 6-9, well, one more thing, 6 and 9, the date 6-9 hints at 6 divided by 9, which is 0.666. But the big reason for the date 6-9 here, and therefore this connection with the Pope on his birthday when he was 69 years old, which hints at Obama, because again, the 70th week is about the Antichrist, and Obama is the second of the two Antichrists. Another reason for 6-9 is because when Jesus was on the cross, darkness fell over the land, came upon the land between the 6th and 9th hour, which would be noon to 3 p.m. So darkness came upon the land between the 6th and the 9th hour, which is symbolic of what's coming when the bottomless pit is opened and demons emerge to take over the land. There will be darkness upon the land. That's why also this relevant symbolic sign that will occur, that's predicted to occur, the opening of pits in Persia, will occur on the date 6-9. Now, I think I've covered the whole diagram here. God bless. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.